The breaking point. The stars shined cold and distant, indifferent to the suffering of those below. On the shattered remains of New Terra, once a thriving human colony, the air was thick with smoke and death. Fires still burned in the ruins of cities, their once proud towers reduced to broken steel and crumbling stone. The scent of ash and blood lingered in the air. Among the ruins, a lone figure stumbled forward. His uniform was torn, his face covered in dirt and dried blood. Lieutenant David Hale had seen war before, but never like this. Not against civilians. Not against children. He clutched a damaged comm device in his shaking hands, praying that it still worked. He pressed the button. "This is Lieutenant Hale of the New Terra Defense Force. If anyone can hear me, New Terra has fallen. They came without warning. No mercy. No survivors. We were betrayed." Static crackled through the speaker. Then, after a long pause, a voice answered. "Message received, Lieutenant. Earth hears you." Earth receives the message. On Earth, inside a vast underground military command center, the room fell silent as the transmission ended. The highest-ranking officers of the United Earth Forces stood frozen. A massive screen displayed the ruined surface of New Terra, the lifeless remains of a once thriving colony. General Marcus Graves clenched his fists. His jaw tightened as he turned to the others in the room. "How many?" His voice was cold. An intelligence officer swallowed hard before answering. "Preliminary reports estimate 10 million dead. Civilians, soldiers, families, all of them." Silence. For years, humanity had played by the rules. They followed the Galactic Council's laws, believing that peace was possible. They fought in self-defense, never striking first. They trusted their so-called allies. But this was not war. This was genocide. Admiral Sarah Connors finally spoke, her voice low and filled with controlled rage. "We gave them mercy. We played their game. And this is how they repay us." General Graves nodded slowly. "Not anymore." The Deathworlders answer. Far from Earth, hidden in the depths of space, lay the most feared warriors in the galaxy, the Deathworlders. They were humans born and raised on Earth's deadliest regions, trained from childhood to survive the harshest conditions. Their bodies were stronger, their reflexes faster, their minds sharper. They were the best of humanity's fighters, the ones who were always held back by politics and peace treaties. Now there were no treaties, no more waiting. Inside the warship Black Phoenix, Commander Elias Voss stood before his assembled troops. His voice echoed through the steel halls, filled with a fury that matched their own. "The Council thought they could erase us. They thought they could kill our families and walk away. They were wrong." The soldiers roared in agreement. Voss continued, his eyes burning with determination. "No more diplomacy. No more negotiations. The order has been given. We are going to war. And this time," he paused, letting the silence stretch, "we don't stop until the Council begs for mercy they will never receive." The Deathworlders cheered, their war drums pounding as their fleet prepared for launch. The Galactic Council reacts. On the Council homeworld of Solara Prime, the alien leaders gathered in secret, their voices filled with nervous energy. "The humans survived," a Xilari official muttered, her purple skin darkening in fear. "How?" "We wiped out their colony," a massive reptilian warlord growled. "It doesn't matter. They are weak. They will do what they always do, negotiate, plead for peace." But a smaller insectoid counselor trembled. "You don't understand. We didn't just attack humans. We attacked Deathworlders." The room fell silent. Even among the stars, humanity had a reputation. A Deathworld species, fighters who adapted to anything, a race that should never be provoked. And now, they had been pushed too far. The war begins. As the Deathworlder fleet left Earth, the message was broadcast across the galaxy. "You wanted war. You have it. We will not stop. We will not forgive." The Deathworlders have risen, and we are coming for you. And for the first time in history, the galaxy trembled. The counterattack. The silence before war is a strange thing. It is heavy, stretching across space like a shadow, suffocating and still. But beneath that silence, there is movement, preparation, purpose. The Deathworlders did not rage. They did not scream. Their vengeance was not blind fury. It was calculated, precise, and unstoppable. The fleet moves. The Black Phoenix led the way, slipping through the void like a phantom. It was not alone. Hundreds of human warships, once restrained by treaties and diplomacy, now moved with singular intent. Their target, Outpost Varkos 7, a key supply hub for the Galactic Council's fleets. It was heavily defended, surrounded by orbital weapons and shielded fortresses. The Council believed it was untouchable. They were wrong. Inside the warship, Commander Elias Voss stood at the bridge, watching the holographic projection of the enemy station. His voice was calm, controlled. Status: enemy defenses are online. Their fleet is stationed nearby, but unaware of our presence. A tactical officer reported. Voss nodded. Good. We strike fast. No warnings. No negotiations. They did not give New Terra a chance to surrender. We will give them the same mercy. The fleet moved into position. Engines powered down, weapons charged in silence. The enemy had no idea they were already dead. Then Voss gave the order. Begin the attack. The first strike. It started with darkness. A sudden electromagnetic pulse ripped through the station, frying their sensors before they could even detect the threat. Panic spread among the defenders as alarms blared, warning them of an incoming attack. Then came the fire. Human warships unleashed a storm of missiles and kinetic railgun rounds that tore through the enemy defenses like paper. Explosions rocked the station as shield generators overloaded and power grids failed. Inside the station, soldiers scrambled for weapons, but it was too late. The Deathworlders were already inside. The ground assault. Elite human soldiers breached the outer walls, moving with the precision of predators. They wore black combat armor, their movements swift and controlled. An alien officer, auxiliary commander, raised his plasma rifle, only for a human blade to slice through his throat before he could even fire. The Deathworlders did not waste time. They hunted. A group of enemy soldiers tried to regroup inside a fortified room. They locked the doors, confident they could hold. But then they heard something on the walls. A deep rhythmic pounding. 1, 2, 3. Then the wall exploded inward, and human warriors stormed through the breach. Plasma fire erupted, but the humans moved too fast, too ruthless, cutting through the enemy with brutal efficiency. The last alien in the room, a trembling officer, dropped his weapon. Mercy, he whispered. The human soldier stared at him, helmet visor reflecting cold light. You didn't show mercy on New Terra. Then he pulled the trigger. The fall of Varkos 7. Within 30 minutes, the station was completely under human control. There were no survivors among the enemy. The Deathworlders had made their message clear. This was not war. This was retribution. Commander Voss stood in the command center, watching the enemy fleet in the distance as they scrambled to respond. He turned to his officers. Broadcast to all frequencies. I want the Council to hear this. The message was simple, cold, final. This is only the beginning. And across the galaxy, fear took root. The galactic panic. The fall of Varkos 7 was like a stone dropped into a still pond. The ripples spread outward, growing larger, faster, until they became a tidal wave crashing across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity before. They believed humans were just another species, loud, stubborn, but ultimately weak. Now, they understood the truth. Humanity wasn't just another race. They were Deathworlders, and they were angry. The Council's emergency meeting. On the shining capital world of Silura Prime, The council gathered in secret. The Grand Chamber, usually a place of calm debate and political maneuvering, was now filled with panic and fear. "This cannot be happening," a reptilian warlord growled, his claws digging into the stone table. "They destroyed an entire military outpost in less than an hour. Our forces were helpless." An insectoid diplomat, his many eyes twitching nervously, buzzed in distress. "We believed their technology was inferior, that their forces were disorganized." He swallowed hard. "We were wrong." The Supreme Counselor, a towering avian being with shimmering blue feathers, slammed his fist against the table. "We must respond with overwhelming force. If we allow them to continue, they will burn our worlds." Silence. Then, a deep voice rumbled through the chamber. "You do not understand what you have unleashed." All eyes turned to High Lord Craxus, the oldest and most experienced strategist in the council. His leathery skin bore the scars of countless battles, and his gaze was hard as stone. The Supreme Counselor narrowed his eyes. "Explain." Craxus leaned forward. "Humans were already dangerous. Their history is filled with wars. On their own planet, among their own kind, they have always fought, always adapted. And now, for the first time in their history, they are united. Not against themselves, not against nature, but against us." A cold realization swept through the room. They had not just started a war. They had woken a monster. The refugee crisis. Across the galaxy, news of the human attack spread like wildfire. For years, many alien species had looked down on humans, mocking them as a lesser race. Now those same species were terrified. Alien civilians fled their cities in fear of human retaliation. Governments scrambled to reinforce their borders, but it was useless. Humanity's fleets moved too fast, their strikes too precise. In some worlds, entire planetary governments surrendered without a fight, hoping to avoid the Deathworlders' wrath. But not everyone feared humanity. Some remembered. The silent allies. Deep in the shadows of the galactic underworld, there were those who had suffered under the Council's rule. The Tarkari rebels, whose homeworld had been enslaved for centuries. The Valen separatists, whose peaceful race had been forced into war. The Xilari dissidents, who had spoken against the Council and been silenced. They watched humanity's war with hungry eyes. They saw hope, and in secret, they sent a message to the Deathworlders. "We are ready to fight. Just say the word." The Council's last hope. Back on Xilura Prime, the Supreme Counselor took a deep breath. He had only one option left. "We must negotiate," he said, voice trembling. The room exploded in protests. "Negotiate? With Deathworlders? They don't want peace, they want blood. We have no choice." The Supreme Counselor snapped. "If we continue this war, humanity will destroy us all." But before they could agree on their next move, an urgent transmission interrupted them. The screen flickered, revealing the cold, determined face of Commander Elias Voss. His message was brief. "No peace, no surrender. You made your choice. Now live with it." The screen went dark. The war was far from over. It was only just beginning. The massacre at the core, there was no stopping them. Humanity was no longer at war. They were on a hunt. And the Galactic Council. They were the prey. The fleet strikes. The Deathworlder Armada moved like a phantom through the void, slipping past enemy patrols, bypassing sensor grids, and closing in on the heart of the enemy's power. The core worlds. The core worlds were the pride of the Galactic Council. Their shining capitals, bustling trade hubs, and fortified command centers had stood unchallenged for centuries. Now, they would burn. First target, Kelos VI. The planet Kelos VI was a fortress world, home to the largest council shipyards and military headquarters outside of Xilura Prime. The council thought it was invincible. Then the sky split open. From the darkness, human warships descended like vultures. The orbital defense platforms, hundreds of them, were armed with plasma cannons and planetary shields, but the Deathworlders had no intention of fighting a fair battle. They never did. The sabotage begins. Long before the attack, human operatives had infiltrated the planet. Sleeper agents hidden among the worker class, engineers bribed into silence, mercenaries who had no loyalty to the Council. On the night of the assault, everything failed. The planetary shields flickered and died. Weapons systems refused to fire. Enemy warships found their navigation scrambled, their engines disabled. Then the real slaughter began. The ground assault. No more mercy. The Black Phoenix led the charge, dropping thousands of Deathworlder soldiers into the capital city of Kilos. They did not come to conquer. They came to annihilate. The enemy soldiers, trained, disciplined, and well-equipped, stood no chance. Deathworlders moved too fast, hit too hard. Their weapons were precise, their attacks brutal. The streets of Kilos turned red with alien blood. The air filled with the screams of those who had once mocked humanity. One by one, key structures collapsed. The Council's primary fleet command, gone. The planetary governor's palace, destroyed. The shipyards that supplied the enemy fleets, reduced to dust. Within 4 hours, Kilos VI was nothing but a graveyard. There were no survivors. The other core worlds panic. Across the galaxy, live broadcasts of Kilos VI's destruction spread like wildfire. On Silera Prime, the Council members watched in horror as the once mighty world was erased from existence. A trembling advisor turned to the Supreme Counselor. They are monsters. The Supreme Counselor did not answer. His hands gripped the table so tightly his claws cracked the stone. Because he knew the truth. They were not fighting monsters. They had created them. The final message. As the Deathworlder fleet left Kilos VI, they transmitted a simple message to the entire galaxy. This was just the beginning. The core will fall. Your rule is over. And as the message echoed across the stars, a terrible realization settled over the Galactic Council. They were no longer rulers of the galaxy. They were the hunted. The final stand. The galaxy trembled. The Deathworlders had turned war into an execution. One by one, the core worlds fell, burned, or surrendered without a fight. No army could stop them. No fleet could outmaneuver them. There was nowhere left to run. The Galactic Council had only one option left, a final stand. The last bastion. Silera Prime. Silera Prime, the beating heart of the Galactic Council, was the last stronghold. It had never been breached. Hundreds of warships surrounded it. The largest planetary shield in the galaxy protected it. Elite soldiers stood ready, waiting, knowing this was their last chance to survive. But they weren't facing an ordinary enemy. They were facing Deathworlders. The false hope. Inside the Council war room, the Supreme Counselor's voice cracked as he addressed his generals. We still have numbers. We still have the strongest defenses in the galaxy. We can stop them. The room was silent. They had seen the reports. Entire fleets wiped out before they could fire a single shot. Fortress worlds erased from history in a matter of hours. The greatest military empire in the universe brought to its knees by one species. An insectoid general broke the silence. His voice was hollow. What if they don't stop? The Supreme Counselor's feathers twitched. What do you mean? The general's many eyes blinked. Even if we surrender, what if they refuse to accept it? What if they don't just want victory? He leaned forward. What if they want extinction? A cold realization settled over the room. There was no stopping this war. The Deathworlders arrive. It began with silence. Then, a single red mark appeared on the holographic star map. Then another. Then 100. Then thousands. The Deathworlder fleet did not come to negotiate. They came to finish what was started. The moment they entered the system, the Council launched everything they had. Missiles, plasma cannons, orbital bombardments. It did nothing. The Deathworlders moved too fast. They dodged, weaved, countered. Their railguns shredded enemy warships before they could even return fire. The shield around Silura Prime, the impenetrable barrier that had stood for centuries, flickered. Then it shattered. The last battle. In the streets of Silura Prime, chaos erupted. Council soldiers, once proud warriors, threw down their weapons. Some fought. Most ran. It didn't matter. The Deathworlders were already inside. They moved with calm, terrifying precision. No wasted movements. No unnecessary destruction. Every bullet, every strike, had a purpose. The city fell within hours. The Council's last elite warriors made a final stand at the Grand Spire, the towering fortress at the heart of Silura Prime. They swore they would fight to the last. But when the Deathworlders breached the doors, the last soldiers surrendered without a fight. The Council's fate. The Supreme Counselor and his remaining officials were dragged from their chambers. They begged. They pleaded. We surrender. We were wrong. Show us mercy. Commander Elias Voss stood before them, his face unreadable, his voice calm. You didn't show mercy to New Terra. The counselors fell silent. They knew what was coming. The cameras were already rolling. Every world in the galaxy was watching. And then, one by one, the leaders of the Galactic Council were executed. Not out of rage, not out of cruelty, but because it was justice, the end of an era. When the executions were over, Voss turned to the cameras broadcasting across the stars. His final words would change the galaxy forever. The war is over. The Council is gone. The old order has fallen. A pause. Then, now we decide what happens next. The galaxy held its breath. Humanity had won. But victory was just the beginning. The new order. The war was over. The Galactic Council, once the ruling power of the stars, was dead. Their homeworld was in ruins. Their fleets were dust. Their armies had been erased. For the first time in history, there was no one left to rule. And so, the galaxy turned its eyes to the victors, to the Deathworlders, to humanity. The silence after war. For days, there was nothing but silence. No new orders, no declarations of conquest, no demands for submission. The other species of the galaxy waited in fear, expecting humanity to claim the throne left behind by the Council. But Earth did not send an emperor. It did not send governors. It sent only one message. We are not your masters, but we will not let this galaxy fall into chaos. The struggle for power. Without the Council, the galaxy fractured. Old enemies rose from the shadows, seeking to claim power. Warlords, pirates, and rebellious factions fought for control. Entire planets descended into civil war. But the Deathworlders had seen this before. They had watched their own history repeat the same cycle. Order, corruption, collapse, war. They refused to let it happen again. And so, humanity made its move. The Deathworlders enforced the law. The first act of the new order was swift and brutal. On Tarsus 9, a former Council stronghold, warlords had enslaved the population, claiming the planet as their own. They believed humanity would ignore them. Then, without warning, the Black Phoenix arrived. The Deathworlders did not negotiate. They erased the warlords in a single night. On Velcaris Prime, corrupt officials tried to rebuild the Council's power in secret. The Deathworlders hunted them down one by one. Across the galaxy, chaos was met with one simple truth. The Deathworlders were watching. And those who tried to take power for themselves, they disappeared. The silent empire. Humanity had no interest in ruling an empire. But they had no choice but to hold the line. They built no thrones, but they enforced order. They took no tribute, but they ensured justice. They claimed no worlds, but no world dared to defy them. And so, the galaxy entered a new age, not ruled by a council, nor by warlords. It was ruled by fear. Not fear of cruelty, not fear of tyranny, fear of Deathworlders. The final warning. Years passed. The galaxy rebuilt. New governments formed, smaller and weaker than the Council. But none dared to make war, because every species knew what would happen if they did. In the void, beyond the borders of civilization, humanity's fleets still watched, waiting, unseen. And across the stars, one whispered phrase remained on the lips of every leader, every soldier, every being who had witnessed the wrath of humanity. A warning, a reminder. Do not provoke the Deathworlders, because if they ever returned, there would be no mercy, no games, only retribution. The end, or beginning. The shadows of rebellion. The galaxy had changed. It was no longer ruled by corrupt politicians or cowardly elites. It was held together by fear. Fear of humanity. Fear of the Deathworlders. Fear of what would happen if anyone challenged their rule. For years, there was peace. No wars, no invasions, no planetary conquests. The Deathworlders did not govern. They did not oppress. They did not rule. But they watched. And if anyone threatened that peace, they disappeared. But peace built on fear is never permanent. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, whispers began to spread. The Deathworlders are not our saviors. They are our jailers. A new enemy was rising. One that did not fear humanity. One that hated them. The spark of rebellion. It started on Tarvik 5, a backwater colony ruled by a fragile council of alien species. A human patrol ship arrived, responding to reports of war profiteers selling weapons to ex-council loyalists. It was supposed to be a routine investigation. Instead, it was a trap. The moment the humans stepped onto the surface, the sky erupted in flames. Anti-ship railguns hidden beneath the colony fired straight into the patrol ship, tearing through its armor. The soldiers on the ground, some of the best Deathworlders alive, were ambushed by an army of rebels. They fought. They held. They bled. But in the end, they were overwhelmed. For the first time since the fall of the Council, the Deathworlders had suffered a defeat. The message of defiance. Hours later, the galaxy's communications network was hacked. A broadcast played on every major planet, station, and colony. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure in a hooded cloak, their face hidden in shadow. Behind them, bound in chains, were the captured Deathworlders. Some were dead. The leader's voice was cold, filled with venom. The time of humanity's rule is over. The Deathworlders think they are gods. They think they are untouchable. But they bleed. They die. And today, we proved it. The camera zoomed in on one of the human prisoners, an officer, bruised but unbroken. A plasma blade ignited. A moment later, his head hit the floor. The screen cut to black. The message was clear. Humanity was not invincible. The age of fear was over. The age of revenge had begun. The wrath of the Deathworlders. When the news reached Earth, the response was immediate. The Deathworlder fleet was mobilized. Entire planets were locked down. New orders were issued. Find them. Hunt them. Erase them. But this was different from the wars before. This was not a war for survival. This was not retribution. This was personal. For years, humanity had chosen to watch, to protect, to keep the peace from the shadows. Now they would remind the galaxy what happens when Deathworlders go to war. The galaxy watches in fear. The rebellion had made its move. The Deathworlders had answered. And the rest of the galaxy. They could only do one thing: hold their breath, because they knew this war would be different. This war would not end with surrender. This war would not end with negotiation. This war would only end when one side was wiped from existence. And this time, the Deathworlders weren't just fighting for justice. They were fighting for revenge. To be continued.